title was not my own. Correct me if I'm wrong. One of my writing Facebook friends thought of. I had no intention of writing a second grammar book, and she sent me a Facebook message that she had a dream that I'd written a book called Correct Me If I'm Wrong. So I did. That's the story of that book. I'm just going to read some snippets. Hopefully you will be entertained or learn something, or both. And now I'm going to tell you the difference between already and already. Okay. Already, one word. Already, two words. All ready for this one? Already, two words. Means ready to go. Already refers to time, one word. Examples: I am all ready to go is two words. I already came home is one word. The cakes are all ready to serve, two. I already served the cakes, one. That you probably know. Then we go to all right, one word, one L, or all right, two L's, two words. This one's pretty simple. I am feeling all right, two words. My answers are all right, two words. Is it all right if I go with you? Two words. All right, come with me, two words. When do you use all right, one word, one L? Anyone? Never. It isn't a word. It's so slang that it's not a word. Don't confuse it with already, because already is a word, but all right is not a word. Okay. Next.
Everybody was entertained by that.
I'm going on. I'm going on. Next. And, should I use a comma before it? We are talking here about that Oxford comma, the series comma. You know, do I put an and after that last item in a series before the, should I put a comma before that and? It was first used by the Oxford University Press, and it's a comma before the and in a series. For example, I want the red comma, white comma, and blue shoes. That sentence uses the Oxford comma, but I want the red comma, white, and blue shoes doesn't. Neither one is incorrect. You can do either one. I prefer to use the comma, and I always tell my students to use it, but it does go in and out of fashion. Although I prefer it, you may not. However, once you decide to use it or not to use it, be consistent. Either use it throughout whatever you're writing, or don't use it at all. That goes for anything that's debatable or you can't find an answer to. Just be consistent and you will look like you know, look as if you know what you're doing. Okay. This is one that I've learned from my daughter, but I've heard since other people say the same thing. I don't think any of you do. I remember started saying on accident instead of by accident. Yeah. I thought it was my own kids, but I guess not. Suffice it to say that on accident is just plain wrong. It's by accident. I threw the book away by accident. I stepped on my dog by accident. Capital O-L or capital A-L? And I didn't know this one, actually, until recently. The correct way to spell capital is always A-L. Almost always. The only capital with an O-L is the one that has a capital C and refers to the building where Congress meets in Washington, and that's it. It's just that building is with the gold dome. That is the only capital, and the capital in ancient Rome also. Okay. Commas. To comma or not to comma? That is the question. Commas are probably the most confusing aspect of writing. Sometimes it's necessary to use a comma. Other times it's necessary not to use a comma. Still other times it's up to you. Some types of commas go in and out of style. For example, that Oxford comma. Sometimes a comma is necessary in a business letter, but could be skipped in a novel. The important thing to remember is that there are rules, and this book has 36 of them, for using commas. Commas are not to be sprinkled throughout your writing like salt and pepper. And I'm not going to tell you where to use a comma. I'm going to tell you some of the places where you don't use a comma. Do not use a comma before a conjunction like and or if the words that follow it aren't a complete sentence. For example, I washed the dishes and swept the floor, no comma. Would you like pizza or chicken? No comma. Unless you're using but. If you use but, and the words on each side are contrasting, you can use a comma. She is tiny, comma, but strong. He took the sofa, comma, but left the chairs and table. Second one, don't use a comma before or after parentheses unless the sentence would have a comma there anyway, even if you didn't have the parentheses. You don't need a comma after junior or senior or esquire if it's abbreviated. For example, Martin Luther King Jr., period, don't need a comma. I always thought you did. Never put a comma before the subject and the verb, unless there's something, an expression set off with commas between them. For example, Hannah and her brothers, comma, went to Paris last week. No, wrong. Never put a comma between a verb and its object. For example, he threw, comma, the ball. No, don't do that either. Never put a comma between an adjective and the noun it modifies. There's only one adjective. She wore a pretty, comma, dress. Never put a comma between a noun or a verb and a prepositional phrase. She was making cookies, comma, in the kitchen. Wrong. Sometimes you use a comma to avoid confusion, and sometimes putting in a comma causes confusion, so you leave it out. Here's an example of one that makes confusion. Richard, comma, my boss, comma, and I are taking a break. Two people are free. Richard, my boss, and I, or is Richard my boss? So what do? If you have a real confusing mess, rewrite. Or rewrite. Richard, who is my boss, and I are taking a break, or I'm taking a break with Richard, my boss. So one of those would be two people, and one would be free. Into, one word, or into, two words. Important distinction. Check out these examples. I turned my book into the library. Two words. I turned my book into the library. Magician? Into as one word answers the question where. Into as separate words doesn't really answer where. The in usually goes with the verb, and the to goes with the words that follow. And if you use into as two words properly, you probably will pause between them. I drove my car into the garage. Where? One word. I turned my paperwork in to the office. I turned it in to the office. I went into the store. One word. I went in to see if I could find a new address. In goes with went. To goes with to see. Layer line. I'm not going to do layer line, but you have to buy the book if you want to know layer line. Layer line. And I will do me or myself, because I'm tired of hearing myself on the news used incorrectly. And I think people are using myself because they don't know whether to use me or I. And they figure myself sounds really good, but it's not right. You can't use myself in a sentence unless the subject is I. So unless the subject is I, myself does not fit in the sentence. That goes for himself and herself and itself too. If you use himself, he has to be the subject. Here it's used correctly. I myself am going to make the presentation, not my assistant. I myself. I is the subject. I made that basket myself. I made it myself. She learned to speak Spanish by herself. She and herself. They helped themselves to the candy. They and themselves. But sometimes you hear it used incorrectly. He gave the candy to my brother and myself. Isn't right. It's he, you can't use myself. It should be just, he gave the candy to my brother and me. All right. They wanted to bring my brothers and myself along. They wanted to bring my brothers and me along. Okay. I'm going to read you a list of redundancy things.
This one, is this the last one?
It can be.
Okay.
Sure.
We might have a lot of questions.
Okay. It's either redundancy or things to avoid. You pick.
Oh, things to avoid. Things to avoid.
Things to avoid. Irregardless is not a word. Don't use being as.
What?
Being as. Or being that. Because you'll sound like, what's her name?
Sarah Palin.
Worse. Honey Boo Boo. Honey Boo Boo's mother. Don't use where and at next to each other. Where is it at or close to each other? Don't use in regards to. It is in regard to, which is one regard, or as regards. If you're writing by hand, and I know you don't do this, but I teach 7th grade, so they do. If you're writing by hand, don't ever use hearts or circles for dots on the eyes. Don't do that. Don't use huh, or gonna, or woulda, or other slang. Don't use large fonts when you write business letters. Stay about 12-point size. It doesn't fool anyone to think it's longer. Don't ever use color fonts unless you have a really good reason. Don't use script or other hard-to-read fonts. Don't use company jargon unless your writing is staying within the company. Don't use sarcasm unless you want to be sarcastic. Stay away from overused and trite cliches. Avoid sexism when you're writing. Avoid stereotyping. Don't make up words. If you intentionally make up a word, use quotes around it. Do not plagiarize. It is against the law. Don't ever use had ought. The word is orient, not orientate. The point is moot, not mute. Height does not end in a th, so don't pronounce it height. Don't use and, slash, or. And mischievous doesn't end in vious, so don't pronounce it mischievous, even though I was told last time that the British pronounce it that way. I don't know. Avoid using folks, it's too informal in a business setting. And, I don't know why, do not use thank you in advance. Thank you, not in advance.
Okay. Questions on grammar? Dan.
How do you feel about he/she?
E.g.
He/she.
He/she, no. That's a real bad, that's just a bad situation. Because,
But sometimes our language pushes us into. Sometimes our language sticks us there, where it's not a sexually determined.
we need a word to represent, oh,
Yes, I agree.
that's probably what the he or she and he/she, or alternating between he and she, or just using he.
H, capital, small e.
Shiz. That's what I told my students, shiz.
I could wait till I read the, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Let's have to do that.
Everybody got it? Anyway, there's one way to put an S slash and then he, H-E. Oh, no, he was saying she, he, or he, she. There's one word, just one word, S slash H-E. I love that.
I've never used it. I don't
That's
know.
okay?
I don't know, I've never used it. I suppose that it probably isn't okay, but I don't know. I don't know. Slashes are never okay.
I just wanted to say there's an index in this book, which makes it really, really helpful.
Handmade, yes.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you, I grew up in the state capital of Wisconsin, Madison, and there's a capital that's the exact replica of the one in Washington. That doesn't matter here, but anyway, there's a square around it, and I know that's with an O, capital square.
Okay, so any capital,
Any state capital,
any
right?
capital building
Good,
that you
thank
call
you.
with a capital C.
Happy to hear that doesn't change.
No, but not the capital of a state, that's AL.
I'm curious about gender. Host, hostess, comedian, comedienne, actor, actress. It seems that everybody wants to be the male thing. Actresses want to be actors. What's going on? Has it become acceptable to do that, or is it wrong?
It used to be unacceptable not to, because don't be sexist. So don't say chairperson, don't say chairman, say chairperson. If actresses want to be called actors, I don't understand why they would. That's just, that's kind of, that they're kind of stereotyping themselves, yeah. That's saying that an actor is better than an actress.
Exactly, yeah. It doesn't have really anything to do with equality or egalitarianism. It's, I don't know, foreign
Like, well, we're not
language.
as good, so we want to be called actors?
I don't know, it seemed that I learned more about gender from studying foreign languages than I did from English, and it got all confused with the
Yeah,
votes.
well, English doesn't even have any genders, yeah, except for votes.
Jim?
Okay. ITS, IT apostrophe S, IT ITS apostrophe. Please explain.
Okay, there's no ITS apostrophe. There's only two, okay. The one that means it is has an apostrophe because it's a contraction that means it is, and all contractions have apostrophes. The one that's ITS is possessive. The dog ate its food. No apostrophe. And there are no apostrophes in any of the possessive pronouns, like it is ours, it is theirs, there's no apostrophe. So it doesn't have an apostrophe, that's how you can remember it. All contractions do, but the possessive pronouns don't. Now you know.
Okay, any more questions? One last question, and then I guess you'll have to buy the book. It's interesting how people are so very interested in grammar, even though we don't even want to admit how interested we are.
I think a lot of people learn grammar through reading, and I wonder, nowadays, kids don't read so much, a lot of what they learn comes through different kinds of media. How do you face that challenge as a grammatician?
My students read a lot. They actually, kids are still reading. I think, the books are so good for kids now that I think they're reading more than ever. They may be reading on Kindles, but I think they're reading. They don't seem to be learning grammar, but they're reading.
You teach 7th, 8th grade?
7.
7th grade at Petaluma
Junior high.
Junior High.
They're reading fantasy.